What bothers me is when I see people working out and running to music that's in a different tempo than
That's hard.
You know what? They need to make an app for that. You type in how fast you're running on the treadmill and it figures out where your steps should land.
Are we at Slayer or are we at Beyonce?
Yeah.
Because I'm a DJ.
I was thinking about that app, actually. You could have it. So, because, it senses the phone senses your pace.
Yeah.
So your Fitbit or whatever, it senses your pace. So it senses your BPM. And they can just automatically just plug in music that's in that.
All right. We'll make that happen.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I'm Siobhán Cronin here once again with my cohorts. First this time, Cory Peza.
Hi, how's it going?
Hey, Cory. And Benny Goodman.
You're assuming they're back. How do you know this is not the first time they're listening because our guest is fucking rad?
Well, apparently we've been so bad at telling people to subscribe, so let me remind you right now, please do subscribe. You can go to 2020-d.com, go in your whatever, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. Yeah. Hit that subscribe button.
Like it too. Like it. Let us know. I don't get the endorphin release unless you. Why do you want to put the fucking thumbs down? Put the thumbs up because it.
I used to feel young saying I was a millennial, but now I'm like so many generations behind. There's now Gen Z and all these TikTokers and stuff, and I'm just feeling old. I don't even know what to tell people to do anymore.
If you're old, then we're screwed.
But anyway, are they
going to know our guests if they're old? If they're not old, because,
we haven't even introduced our guest yet. So before we get carried away, let me introduce that today we have the masterful Ulrich Wild, who is behind so much of the music that you've heard, seen, listened to, all
Alice
throughout.
in Chains, White Zombie, Sting, Doggy Style, Snoop Dogg in the house. What's my name? And then they have Dirt. That's one of my favorite records ever. He also did Green Jelly, which is Little Pig, let me. No, but. And if you like Tool, stupid fucking fact, Maynard James Keenan is the wolf in that. And then he does Death Clock. If you didn't love Death Clock, Science. The one record that matters by Incubus, in my opinion, Pantera, Stained. I mean, one of the biggest.
The guy's discography.
Silly!
Yeah, his credits are insane. You've definitely heard his work. He's a very, very fascinating person to listen to as far as the technical side of how some of these records came together, and he's very, very humble considering the work that he has done
and who he's worked with.
Yeah, so here we go. Before we give too much away, check out part 1 with Ulrich Wild.
Hello and welcome to another episode of 2020. My name is Cory Peza, and I'm here as always with my co-hosts Siobhán Cronin.
Hey.
And Benny Goodman.
Again, hay is for horses and cows, but we'll let it slide.
I'm going to stick to it.
More like an interjection this time. It was like an interjection.
Right. Well, more importantly, with us today, we have a very special guest, someone who has been a part of many of your lives, whether you know it or not.
My mixtapes in particular.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Producer, mixer, engineer, Ulrich Wild, whose credits include Alice in Chains, Pantera, Incubus, Slipknot, Stained, Breaking Benjamin, and even Death Clock, which some of you might have known from the show.
And even Snoop fucking Dogg. Because that was crazy, because that record changed my life, and we'll get into that. But like when I was listening to Judas Priest, Pantera, and Iron Maiden and all that, all of a sudden came gangster rap, and this dude was on both sides. He's like the Velociraptor staring at you as the other one comes up behind you, and it's Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg.
Well, the list of credits, we could be here all day. They're all incredible. But first off, just thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
I guess the main thing we can get started on is with such an illustrious career, what got you into engineering and producing?
I guess I wasn't good enough to be a performer.
It's adaptability right there.
That is kind of the gist of it.
Did you try to pursue music before you moved?
I was in bands when I was a kid, a teenager in Switzerland. Nothing came of it. And then it just it was a means of coming back to San Francisco again, where I was for a little while studying English. And then I just kind of liked it and started pursuing it. I was always doing the techno stuff and when I was in the bands. So it was really just kind of that arm just got longer, and the performance arm.
It's funny you say techno stuff, because usually a lot of the millennials that are listening think that you might be on the tables, and not even the real tables, but like the Pioneer CDJs.
No, the technical aspect.
The technical aspect. Well, we just have to clarify, because I'm a dumb guitar player. You should know better.
Not the boots and cats and boots and cats.
No, really, and at that point, what we're talking about is the Tascam 4-track. Actually, it was a Vestafire 4-track cassette.
Was that like an ADAT or one of those, or is it like a high 8, or did you burn it onto like Betamax? Like
it was basically a rock. It was a cassette tape, like a literal, like hipster cassette that actually, and a stereo obviously has 2 tracks, and so you flip those over, so there's another 2 tracks, so there's a total of 4 tracks available to you on that little cassette.
Now, did you use the high position cassettes? Like, did you use the chromium dioxide ones? Because I don't know why, but those ones sounded better, and I'm like, is a high, like, how high does this position need to be better sounding?
That was kind of later, really. We didn't have those options at that point. There was the cassette, and that was it. It started to get a little fancier. They definitely, just like any tape has different qualities about just the composition of it. And
do you say that to all the tapes?
Ben, why don't you let him finish his sentences?
Yeah, you have any of the 2-inch and 1/2-inch tape, like the 24-track machines that we used. All those different tape formulations, they had different qualities and different hiss and different high end and different low end, and it's just like any product.
As you got into engineering, like what were some of your first projects that kind of maybe made you think that this is something you wanted to pursue as a career?
Well, it started out as I started as a runner in a studio in San Francisco, and one of the very first projects that came through was actually Joe Satriani with John Cuniberti. Yeah, I'm old.
That's amazing.
Well, you could run back then.
That laugh, yeah. And I got to make coffee for them. That was like one of the first things. And from there, it just moved up to assisting and then engineering. Very.
And that was kind of the established way to get into the industry at that point, right?
Much,
you couldn't just just start a studio for them. Like if you wanted to learn, because there was no YouTube, there was no ability just to kind of figure this out. You couldn't have a home studio because a studio at that point cost a little bit of money. So that's a pretty common path. Yeah,
it's a lot of money.
So as you moved up, what aspect of the engineering kind of caught your ear? Was it being in the creative environment, or was it the technical side of things?
Just, I think a little bit of all of it. The most important part of engineering really is the psychological aspect of it. The technical stuff, that's easy to learn, really. That's just crack open a book and learn about signal flow, and really every knob just makes something louder somewhere. That's kind of like the end of it.
I'm still learning, so.
Yeah, well, like the nuances are there. Obviously, this mic, this mic, this tape sounds like that. That tape sounds like it. And so, that's just knowledge that comes over time. But the harder part is to talk a musician down from the ledge to get a performance, or or like help somebody with the writer's block, or whatever, accept them, or find ways to get them to accept a new horizon for their art, or something just different. That's really the difficult part. The engineering portion of it is fun, and it's so second nature to me at this point that I have to really watch out that I don't kind of get stale for it. So I purposely actually try new things every time I record a new band, I always try to shake it up a little bit. So it's not always the same thing. You got to play through this and got to play through that.
That's good, because I can imagine, especially if you're working consistently like you have been for so many years, it's really easy to get into kind of a routine and almost a template. So you're saying that you just kind of like maybe throw like a wrench in the machine to see if it brings you somewhere new?
Oh, for sure. I mean, back in the day, you would rent a studio and you'd go there with the band and you'd have the equipment that the studio was known for. And that was the room, the sound of the room, and, it's just the experience overall. And you'd get a certain sound, a certain, snapshot in time when you made that record, because, the next client was coming in, you had to leave. There's no piddling about unless you had huge budgets, whatever. But, it's get in, get it done and leave, and go usually to a different studio to mix and get that done and be done and fret until, the record comes out and people hear it. And so that there was a snapshot in time for a record. And now, a lot of people have their places, a lot of people have their own gear, and I record everybody here at my place, and so I have my stuff, and just branching out and having the bands come in with their equipment is refreshing. So I want to always start out with the equipment that they have, because that is their starting point. They came to that unless they're very, very young, but as a journey of experimenting, of live performances, of just their vision. The equipment that they have is what they arrived on, and that's what we start out with. If we can't get what we want out of that, then we'll explore. But that's one way to keep everybody unique, as opposed to, this is the best amp in the world, you got to play through this amp, otherwise, we're not going to make a good record. It's like, if everybody plays to the same amp and uses the same snare sample, then you get what we have now.
So you've worked with some obviously incredible acts that have a sound. So can you talk about maybe specifically any artists you worked with that came in and you felt the pressure to maybe maintain a certain sonic element or trait that they had prior to working with you?
The established acts, they have gotten to that place because they've been good so far, and they've worked into that sound. And so usually we just continue on where they left off.
Right.
There's the backwards compatibility issue, Right.
But you work with a band like Pantera. Is that just, so you're saying that just they come in and you just get out of the way and let them do their thing?
Well, you might want to get out of the way, because I feel like Dimebag could be throwing like whiskey at your head, or maybe making you take shots of hot sauce.
Well, that can certainly happen. For starters, I wasn't producing Pantera. I was, helping Terry.
Okay. Does anyone produce Pantera? I feel like no one can produce. Like they were in the room with those guys. Am I crazy?
Well, yeah, no.
No one puts Dimebag in a corner, man.
No, I mean, that's definitely a point. Like a great band or great artists are somewhat self-producing, because they have that vision, they have that drive, they have that, that fire to get, and the knowledge that comes along with it to get that thing done. And yes, sometimes the most important job of the producer is to stay out of the way, and it really can vary greatly from project to project. One artist literally just needs somebody to bounce ideas off of and kind of, have a dialogue about things, and other people just need to be completely whipped in shape. It really,
that makes sense. And just before we do gloss over, Pantera, because I know at least two of the members on this call are, have listened to that record quite a bit. Can you talk a little bit about your contributions and what your part was in that?
Yes, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, my contribution was insignificant. As I said, I was there as officially my title was engineer, and Terry was the producer / co-producer. I forgot what the credit reads, but because Dime and Vinny and Rex and Phil, they're self-producing in a grander scheme of things. The job of Terry as a producer was to help them make this best record. And that's always the job, is you help somebody make the best record that they can make. And so with I was there predominantly for technical support. They had,
I feel like they needed a lot of technical support. Like, did you make the Jaeger bombs for them? Did you make the 7 and 7s, the Blacktooth Grins? Because from my little experience, the first thing that Dimebag ever said to me was, "Can you draw ace?" And then pushed a girl in my way with a Sharpie marker. So like, I feel like being technical support for Pantera might be different than for some other bands.
They certainly were their own wild selves. In
How the Wild family, right?
I learned, the thing is, how much did I learn from them as opposed to what was my imprint on of my thing, what I did with them. I helped, obviously the usual thing of, recording and running tape machines and whatever. We actually recorded those guitars on DA-88s, believe it or not.
I do believe it.
Because Dime didn't like the delayed punching of 2-inch tape. So just finding the sounds for everything was a huge thing. And oddly enough, what we ended up with as their main guitar sound was not the fancy Neve preamps and EQs and what we normally did, but the sound that he ended up liking was actually a tiny little Mackie mixer. So just interfacing all of that. They were building all the, that whole studio in his new house, and part of that experience was help finish, tying things together and get it ready for recording. I mean, they had they'd gotten their tape machine in, they got the console in that they wanted, and it was just getting ready to be operational. And so it was part of that. So
basically, while the Death Star was being completed, Darth Vader was like, "Come use this 4-track Mackie in the back. We're gonna get it old school style." Because I remember the first time I went to Longview Farm Studios that has a Neve. I sat down with my producer the first time. I got lucky in that I was old enough to make a record the old school way, and he asked me, "Well, what can I use for a reference for sound?" And I pulled up Pantera. The vulgar display of power, and he was like, why do you have problems with mids? I'm like, I love the sound of this record. We had a Bogner, we had a Matchless, we had VHT, and he started explaining, he's like, "You're not going to get it, but this only works because of everything else on this record, and that's why you like it." And I said, "No!" And then that was the first time I realized, have your own tone, and that works for Dimebag, but not for you, man.
That there's certainly truth to that. The thing about tone is most of it, or a large part of it, comes from your picking hand. That is what a lot of people just neglect. They think it's all the flashy left hand stuff, but really the sound, the actual sound of the instrument is the picking hand. The gear, of course, is important. Nobody's going to argue with that. But you could take any guitarist. You could take Eddie Van Halen, rest in peace, and put it on any rig and it'll sound like Eddie Van Halen. But nobody can get on his rig and start.
Well, let me ask you this. I have a column called Neurotic Guitarist where I do explain. I have 160 guitars. I haven't gotten any better, and neither is my tone, even though I have awesome stuff. And I always say it is The tone is in your fingers, and it's the same thing. You know, everyone, you hear the story. I went through Brian May's rig. I went through Eddie Van Halen's rig, and I just sounded like me. As a producer and an engineer, do you think that like tone is in your fingers? So where the tone stops for Dime or stops for whatever guitar player you're working with, are you the other guy that does it matter that you're going through the SSL or the Neve, or is it just you can use anything and you're just a tweaker? And that's the tone in your fingers, and that the rest of the equipment is the same as the guitar amp and the guitar, because you're the producer and the engineer.
That's pretty much it. I mean, you know, like if you have gear that's too crappy, like a guitar that doesn't stay in tune, then you're just lost. You know what I mean? But,
assuming you have a baseline of usability.
Yeah. You can, you know, I always say, give me 2057s and a Mackie and we'll make a great record. You know?
Yes.
You don't need, like, the rest of it is excuses. You know what I mean? Is it going to be sounding the same as like the really high dollar gear? Like, no, but you know what? It might actually have more charm. It might actually be better because it has limitations and you have to be creative about it.
So there was a video I was watching from a few years back where you were doing I think it was Warren Hewitt. You were in your studio doing, and you have a home studio, and it's a relatively modest setup for the work that you do, I think. And it goes against a lot of what you see when you see, you know,
Cory, don't you know Billie Eilish made her record in her room?
Right, of course.
Come on, Cory, she won a Grammy.
She didn't mix it there though.
Are you sure?
No, she sent it to, I forget the guy's name, but a much better mixer.
Chris Lord-Alge.
No, but kind of the, you know, talking of Chris Lord-Alge, you see his studio and you see the absolute pinnacle of every most sought after piece of gear. The huge desk.
Number 0001.
Yeah, it's incredible. And then, you know, being able to see or hear what you're putting out with what is a very attainable setup for most engineers compared to some of those other studios. It kind of goes to show you that it's not the gear, it's your ear. Where did that kind of utilitarian mindset come from for you? Because you did start off in those, you know, the crazy studios and everything. At what point were you like, you know what, I can make this work with this?
How many times did you go on like the chair across the board from like over there where there was like probably like an amp, and then over there's like a vocal, and you just have to go back and forth because the SSL console's so big you can't even see the end of it?
That, you know, the whole console thing is really funny because a lot of the stuff you aren't actually mixing while sitting in the sweet spot. So there's definitely truth to that behemoth sitting in the room. But you know, it's actually in those big expensive studios that you come to realize that the gear is just you know, a means to an end. Because when you travel from studio to studio, like I was able to do, not every studio had the same stuff. And so you needed to accommodate. Like, you know, it was like I always use 421s on the toms, but they don't have any here. So what do? What do you guys use on the toms normally? Well, here we go. Let's use those then and see what happens. And you can't, again, unless you have to budget unlimited dollars, you can't halt a session and wait for, you know, 2 weeks for a microphone to become available, or for, you know, somebody to run out and get new mics while you're sitting in a residential studio in the woods or whatever. None of that, you know, applies really. That's why it's that having to become creative was like, well, I never used this mic before. I guess these are our overhead mics today. So let's see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, I want to jump in and ask a few questions because I'm obviously the odd one out here that doesn't understand anything about mixing. I'm a violinist, acoustic player.
As you sit in front of your your NS10 wannabe.
Well, okay, so this is primarily my husband's studio.
Don't knock those speakers because I have those.
I love them. I love them. I'm just saying that's like the quintessential speaker, that she's sitting in front of a beautiful console studio. So tell us more how you don't know anything, Siobhán.
No, but I'm trying to learn. So what I'm interested in hearing, you know, you said that earlier that you started as a runner in a studio and obviously were able to get the exposure to start doing this as a living. And I'm interested to hear how you actually learned or got to put that into practice, because now, you know, there's so much overwhelming information available online and all this gear, and everyone feels like they need all this gear and programs and stuff. And for me, I almost feel like it's harder to learn because I don't even know where to start as someone that does recordings in my house and wants to try and mix it on my own, let's say.
I mean, that is the thing that changed. I went to, and this is going to circle back a long ways here. When I went to recording school as kind of one of my first things, and it was terrible. It was terrible recording school, and I was very down on recording schools because you actually learned the trade and the craft in the studio from other people. And kind of your hint was when you didn't learn so much anymore, and you can't, you always learn something, but like once the rate of learning goes down and you're kind of getting the sense of like, oh, I could do this on my own. I
The
think
threshold is being
I've
turned.
kind of learned what I can learn. And you start flying away and do your own thing. Those opportunities are not, that available anymore to people. So the recording schools, I think, are more important now for people to learn things and find a community and mentors or what have you. Because now, basically, as a musician, you're required or expected to buy a piece of equipment and learn how to engineer out of a manual. So that, so these courses and online courses and YouTube and everything is very helpful. I mean, I find myself referencing some of that stuff simply because it's just an easy, good way to do it. So I don't actually remember what your question was, but, ultimately, you have all this equipment out there, and this is a whole larger issue of being bombarded with advertisement and all that stuff. And so you do feel like, oh, I need all this, I need this, I need that too. Otherwise I can't make a real good record or good recording. But ultimately you need to just start, because it's really the song and the musical ideas and your expression, your playing, that will make the difference. So if you keep waiting for the right moment, if you keep waiting for the right piece of equipment or it'll never happen for you. So like your writing, your recording, your performances are not going to get that much better by having a new software synth or something like that. You know what I mean? You just you have to get going.
A painter can't blame his paints at a certain point for not sounding good. So, when you have a Paul Reed Smith, $2,000 guitar and you have a full Marshall stack and you still sound like I do, you basically say maybe it's your fault. Maybe it's your fault. It's not the SM57. It worked for everyone since the dawn of time. Maybe it's you. Siobhán, how do you feel about that, being a violinist?
Well, as a violin, I mean, this is kind of a weird space.
You don't
for
even
me
have
too.
Frets.
Well, I don't have frets, but
because he was saying he frets a lot.
Well, for me, a lot of what I think about, is microphones, because playing an acoustic instrument, right? Like, I'm just trying to learn by doing, So obviously this is like a sound treated room. When I've gone into other studios, I've always been used to playing in live rooms, different types of microphones. So as someone that's never been on the engineering side or, the recording side, it's, it can be overwhelming, I think, to, realize that there are infinite possibilities of making something sound good even before it goes into the mixing stage, especially in acoustic instruments. What microphone do you use? Where do you place it? A matter of where in the room it is and what angle it's at can make such a huge difference. And I find it's hard, especially as a violinist, to find resources or information on that, because there aren't many violinists that are recording themselves. They're all going into classical live rooms, and being recorded.
What's really important with you, and he alluded to it, and I want to make sure we bring it back to this. You're so good, we could put my headphones and just change them, plug them into the mic input, and just point it at you. And, if it was Randy Rhoads or Dimebag Darrell or Siobhán Cronin, it's going to sound good. She's trying to play Paganini's Fifth
I disagree.
Caprice at 166
It'll be a great performance, but it will not sound good. Because I don't know.
Come on!
Ulrich,
These are really nice headphones.
I have a question. Or what's your opinion on close mic'd violin in a non live room situation? Because for me, it hurts my ears and it's very difficult for me to make it sound.
No, it's awful. I cringe when I hear it.
Yeah,
like it's a mistake.
It's something that I deal with often, because we are in a, I should just preface this by saying we're in a band that does kind of instrumental symphonic music, and so we do a lot of strings, and Siobhán does incredible layers and will send me 100 tracks of violin that are performed immaculately. And then I think that I am passable enough that I've yet to be fired for my production and mixing.
Well, we don't have enough money to replace you.
Exactly. I'm very cheap. I have tried everything in the book that I'm aware of to get a natural sound. I think that we've done a pretty good job of getting there, but it's been through a lot of trial and error. So what would be your advice to create a natural sound from a unnatural kind of room recording?
Trial and error.
Yes, I'm doing it right.
I'm serious. I mean, that's
an ulcer.
Like you expect yourself to be a full-fledged recording engineer and mixer, like in a day. Where are your 10,000 hours? Like are you putting as much time into engineering as you're putting into like practicing your instrument?
He better be or he's fired.
Well, Cory certainly is, but I certainly am not.
but that's my point though. Like, you have to just start and do it and then go like, well, that didn't work out as well as I thought it would, and then do something different next time.
That's a daily occurrence.
Let me ask you, sorry, Cory, did you have something?
I was just saying that's a daily occurrence.
So, with me, my husband's a guitar player and he's much better with the engineering and mixing side. And we get into arguments, frequently about, so for example, recording a violin in a really dead room like this and then adding a room onto it. And how does that equate with actually just playing the violin in a live room and miking it at a distance where it's got that natural sound on it? So, to me, I almost feel like across the board, it feels better to just get the right mic placement in a live room and it sounds great. You add nothing to it. Let's say it's just violin solo or violin and piano or something, versus putting it at a close mic, like Cory said, and then trying to add all of this stuff on top of it to simulate.
No, everyone has an 80-foot room, dude.
No, that's true. But I'm just saying, but let's say even just a slightly bigger room or something where it's not right up on you and you've got complete sound treated, sound booth or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, that goes back to the experimenting thing and to your limitations and to your budget and your time frame. Do you need to have it done now? Can you go somewhere? Yeah. You know what I mean? All those questions. And then really, what is it going to be used for? If it's, as you say, just a piano and a violin, yeah, you might want to just go into a nice room and do that because that's going to be so much nicer and more natural sounding if that's what you're after. But if your violin is going up against like 6 guitar tracks, a distorted bass or whatever, and sample enhanced drums and like symphonic vocals and whatever else, you're going to have to cut through that. And a natural violin sound is probably not where you're going to be after that point,
Interesting. Yeah.
So like, it's your end goal. And again, it's your vision. And the experimenting of it, like you go like,
you alluded to something really important because I found this out through a lot of trial and error and definitely the 10,000 hours of going back and forth. Sitting as a guitar player originally and saying, this is the sound I want, sitting in front of my amp, versus what sounds good in a studio afterwards when I've now had the chance to get the mixes, or you take, we were talking to Steve Stevens and he was like, you think my guitar sounds huge in Rebel Yell, but just because of the way it was mixed, I play it now with just the tracks and it sounds kind of small by comparison. And Cory was one of the first people to remind me that instead of just turning everything up, that part of making things loud is learning how to take away from other things or finding where things compete with each other. So you really alluded to that point, and I think it's so important that we mention it because it's one of those things that, a lot of people are going to be in a basement studio. Siobhán, yes, if we had the opportunity to record in a church or a mausoleum maybe because we know somebody.
Well, I didn't mean something quite that dramatic. I just meant a slightly less dead room.
But it's important. But the thing to bear in mind is he made a very good point because in the reference of things, what is this being used for? And you got to think what's going to cut through. So my guitars, I hated mids. I scooped mids specifically because of Dimebag Darrell. Thank you. And now I know I need that mid range because that's where I'm going to live if it's in a mix and I want to be heard and not stepping on everyone else's equalized dick.
Well, but it depends again on what kind of sound you have and how your guitars are tuned and where the vocal sits. If you have a feeling.
You lost me at tuning my guitar.
You and many others.
Yeah. We're talking 440, 441, 442.
No, it's just any tuning, and the tune in itself. No, but like the finding space for everything is super important when you mix. Like the snare, the crack of the snare, and a lot of vocals, and the mids of the guitars. They're all sitting in the same kind of space. So there's the cymbals, the sibilants, and the fizz of the guitars. And the low end, you have the kick and the bass, and the low end of the guitars. All working together, and so like you have these frequency bands that have competition within each other's, or within themselves, or whatever the hell the sentence is. And so you have to find that space where everything sits, and a female vocal is going to sit different from a male vocal, and a growl is different from a King Diamond, and you know what I mean. So it's all and so the guitar sounds. You can very much step on certain things, and then when you add keyboard and violin and everything in, like.
Can I translate this for dumb guitar players? So it's like when you're in your high school photo and they're like, find your windows. You can't see how ripped I am, the fact I'm wearing a Maiden shirt, but you can still see my face, and it is there, and it does make the photo. Find your fucking windows, because at the end of the day, Cory says it all the time. Not everything can be loud. I have a compressor. I have a sonic maximizer. I put it on every track. Everything can be loud. Just so you know.
As long as the guitars that are loud.
Right.
What?
As long as the guitars are loud.
What? I can't hear you with these crazy Tesla coils in my ears.
Well, let me ask
ridiculous.
you a question about, formulating a career on the mixing or producing side. So, obviously the era where you started getting involved must be pretty dramatically different than it is now. So many people are finding careers by starting on the internet or going on YouTube or whatever, completely different. So, let's say if you're a musician and you're interested in getting into mixing or producing, and you're just starting from nothing. You're a great, let's say, performer, you kind of know how to mix. How would you suggest getting experience or is it still go and work for a studio, be a runner? Like what's the process now of kind of getting into that, throwing yourself into that world?
That is a good question. And I don't know that I am the best person to ask that.
Okay, no, that's fine. I was just curious if you knew.
But like my whole approach is, coming back to this again, sound like a broken record. Is
record? What's that?
I know, right? It's like, what the?
No, they're cool now. I heard they're cool now.
What is it? What's a broken record mean? What the hell are you talking
No, but they're cool now. Now they know what the record is, and people will pay $29.99. Do you not remember when people were trying to give them away for $2.99? Here's Kiss Alive. Now it's $49.99 wrapped up, and it's got the smell of the fucking pot smoke for 47 years.
Oh my god!
And people pay for that versus the brand new 180 gram. Pressing of the same crappy record that still doesn't have bass in it because nothing on record does.
Yeah. True enough. But it is the thing. Like if you feel like you might be into it, and I'm sure like people who are starting out recording and producing and mixing themselves, like it's kind of like a slope. You know what I mean? They kind of start getting into it over time, as opposed to, waking up one morning, digging ditches somewhere. It's like, you know what? I should mix records instead.
Yeah, sure.
Can I stop you here because I actually wrote a bunch of notes, and I went on to your Wikipedia because there's actually pretty extensive and impressive Wikipedia. So good for you. And it starts off, like engineer, then like production, and then like mixing. And I feel like and Cory can empathize with this. So I don't know if you've seen the movie Zoolander, but Fabio in that movie goes and he wins an award for being the greatest actor / model. And he goes and accepts the award and he goes, "I'm so glad that you love me as an actor / model and not the other way around. If you were a producer / mixing guy / engineer / psychologist / pouring dime bag alcohol," you know what I mean? Like, which order would it be in? Because it seems like a landslide that started with the engineering thing and then you slowly got sucked in because no one else could do it.
I don't know about sucked in. I think persevered is more like it. Because like in the beginning, they don't let you mix. You only get to mix, low budget stuff where they can't afford to get the big guy. And so, I guess I just got better at mixing and started mixing more things. And now it's different because a lot of people are producing their own records in their bedrooms and they send it to me to mix, because mixing's hard,
Sure.
And so, yeah. And so,
mixing isn't hard. Mixing well is hard, sir. Because anyone can mix and you could bounce it right off and be like, that's fucking great. You put it in your car. Some dude's got his subwoofer going and you're blowing people out and they think they're listening to Dre. And in fact, they're just listening to death metal.
Yeah, my mixing sounds bad on every speaker, so it doesn't
But that's
matter
how you
where
know.
you play it.
but that's
how you know.
point though. Now you know what, now you know what not to do.
True, I've gotten marginally better over the last year.
That's
Just a
usually
little
how
bit.
I put it. I usually say like 10 years ago I sucked and now I just suck less, and I hope that continues. Like
I have
throughout.
to actually about the sucking less. I did watch an interview and you were talking about the grit in speakers. So I'm an audiophile before I am anything good, and so I know what good sounds like. I don't necessarily know how to get there. I have Martin Logan electrostatic speakers. You probably understand. There's no crossover between 420 and below, so they're pretty goddamn amazing. But you mixed forever on NS10s, which are completely unforgiving. So there's a balance. Let me ask you, how good do you want your monitors to be? Because I feel like you don't want something as good as the Martin Logans, where I feel like I listen to Jurassic Park and I'm in it and nobody's ever listening on those speakers, but you don't necessarily want them to suck because you want it to sound good. Where's the threshold between it's worth spending money on the speaker because it's better sounding, but also transparent enough to tell you suck?
It's very important to have speakers that reveal the problem areas in your mix, because there's a lot of speakers that just sound good, but they don't help you make better mixes. So these little Yamahas that I have, they are basically the new version of the NS10s.
What Siobhán has.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually compared them to NS10s when, right when I bought these things, and they essentially do the same thing, which is kind of like have they expose like that mid range for the vocals.
5 decibels, 7 decibel bumps for
I
fun.
don't know, dude.
It's pretty crazy. No, I'm just saying. I read about those, and it's pretty crazy. It's like a weird.
And so it's
thing.
just like has like this weird mid rangey bump that it really exposes the stuff that you need to hear, so you can fix it, so it'll make a better mix. And then I have these big KRKs, the V8s, which are they sound a lot fuller. They sound a lot better, for all intents and purposes. But they still have a little bit of that revealing quality. Like you want it to be kind of neutral, but really the most important thing is that they sound good in your room. Because like the placement of your speakers in the room, just the room itself, how it's treated. If there's
is there a good test
buildup,
to know what sounds good in your? Because what if you've never heard good sound? Because one of the things when I used to sell speakers was first off, how good are your ears? Like, have you had your hearing tested? And do you even know what good sound sounds like? So how does me, stupid guy in my own apartment with no treatment, know that these speakers I bought from whatever guitar store, Reverb, whatever, sound good? Is there a test? Is there a way for me to measure besides, like to know? Like I'm in the sweet spot. Like this is what I know. My speakers were good and a good investment. As an idiot,
there are little devices around and plugins, what have you. Like I think IK Multimedia makes a thing where it helps you measure your room and stuff like that. But really, one of the biggest tests is just to simply listen to your favorite records and do listening tests with moving the speakers around, closer to the wall, further away from the wall, on the board, not on the board, on stands, the orientation of your setup inside the room can make a big difference. But like you have your favorite records, and if you listen to them on your speakers, what that sounds like, and you're going to use that as your brain reference.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask a question. Let's say you're somebody that's starting from absolute scratch, as I have before. Obviously there's a giant range in the amount of equipment you can have to build, let's say, a home studio. What would you identify as kind of the most essential baseline elements that you need to be able to function and create something good without
so
having
you
to
can
go
put
over the top?
hashtag producer for real on your Instagram, as opposed to just having
Not
one
that I'm saying
iMac
everyone should become a
and
mixer,
a DAW
producer,
and
whatever.
and one like blue microphone that's USB connection.
No, but this is a thing because some people have this.
Right now for this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some people have like the
Sounds
gear
like
acquisition
shit.
syndrome, right? Where it's like, I can't do this until I have this piece of equipment, and it's like the
calling me
eternal
out?
black hole. It's the eternal bunny hole of thinking that you need the next thing to be able to do this. So, if you had to identify what are kind of the baseline essentials, what would those be?
But you're asking me as a mixer, as a recordist, or as
Wow, well, that's a good
recording whole
question.
bands? Am I a composer? Am I a violin player?
So nowadays,
You know what I mean?
nowadays a musician has to be all those if they want to do their own
We
thing.
can't
So
afford to
as-
have you be multiple people,
what
man.
if you were to make a stew of all those jobs, because we have to wear so many hats, I guess, where would you say would be the place in the middle where that meets?
Well, I don't know. It's very vague of an answer because, you need to have enough preamps to record what you want to record. You need to have enough microphones to record what you want to record. A computer, the interface, and some of that stuff goes hand in hand. The interface might have the preamps on it.
Okay, so let me extrapolate this again for stupid people, because I used to work trying to sell these things to people when, mom and pop shops still existed, and people would come in and go, dude, what do I need to make beats and make things happen? And, I got this iPhone thing and plug it into my 4-track. And it's like, so for me to answer that question, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, the most important thing is, again, one, determining what people are recording. So if you're recording only vocals or one track at a time, all you need is one good preamp, and all you need is one good microphone that can do everything. And like an SM57, if you're really broke, I mean, now they're more than $100 or whatever, but a brand new SM57 can do everything that you ever need. And if you did have only 50,
Get them used off reverb.
Yeah, right. Then obviously the microphone. If you're doing vocals or anything besides just guitars or what have you, like a microphone, because and then the preamp. And those are like the three that I always tell people. And then beyond that, if you want to do drums and all that sort of stuff, it's a different world. But those are the three things. Yeah, but the three things you can go and make, you could do guitar recordings, you can do vocals. And other than, doing something drums that requires so many at a time, you can do virtually everything in your bedroom with those three things. And if you have a good mic, a good preamp, and then, sorry, I missed the DAW, something that at least has a good channel, like one good, and sometimes the DAW and the preamp are the same thing, at this point, you're good. And then it's up to you. It's up to you now. There's nothing saying I'm not using the right cassettes. I don't have an SSL board. There's no excuse to say you suck now. Because back in the day, I could come to you, right, and say, here's a cool demo. And it's me sitting there playing into an old cassette recorder. And I'm like, dude, do you get it? Do you get it? Now you have to send somebody already a perfectly mixed recording that sounds better than something you may have done 25 years ago in your own mind. And they're like, that's not good enough. Go re-record it, Tom Schultz. Boston isn't good enough with these demos.
Well, I bet a lot of the quality too starts with just the quality of the raw assets, for lack of a better term, the raw playing, and that's what I appreciate about acoustic instruments and being a violinist is I feel like my ear has developed to be pretty refined, that I can hear bad intonation, even like of the slightest bit, really easily, or bad rhythm. Not necessarily while I'm playing, it's harder, but if you're listening to something else. So if you can...
Did you ever have a boyfriend that was that you're like annoyed with because they didn't have good rhythm?
I didn't really date many musicians until I got married.
No, I know, but if they weren't musicians, even the better, because maybe they aren't paying attention to the fact that they don't have rhythm in their life. Does that bother you?
No, I mean, everyone's got their own thing.
Okay,
might drive me a little crazy, but I'm never gonna,
what bothers me? What bothers me is when I see people working out and running to music that's in a different tempo than
oh yeah,
that's hard.
They need to make an app for that. You type in how fast you're running on the treadmill, and it figures out where your steps should land.
Are we at
That would be
Slayer
nice.
or are we at Beyonce?
Yeah.
Because I'm a
You totally do it. I was
DJ.
thinking about that app actually. You could have it so because it senses your the phone senses your pace.
Yeah.
So your Fitbit or whatever, it senses your pace. So it senses your BPM, and then you can just automatically just plug in music that's in that.
All right, we'll make that happen.
I was gonna say because Corey's seen this. I was a DJ for a long time. That's how everyone's like, how do you have all these guitars and all that? What band you in? I'm like, dude, I'm a fucking DJ. How do you think I can afford said guitars and this awesome DAW? I have to go play Return of the Mac. I have to go play September, which is always good. It's always good. But then when you do it for a long time, you start realizing, okay, at 112. Ain't too proud to beg. We're getting mom and dad out, grandma out. But if you want to slow it down, you're at 70. We're at gangster rap Jay-Z slow. But then 130, 140, that's some 80s shit faster than techno because 128 was 120 really when Guetta started. But I start thinking about this. So now I think to myself, baby making music, let's start at 70 BPM. If we're making a thrash song, we got to go 130. That's what Blackmore thought was good. And what doesn't Blackmore know about thrashing around? But do you think about that ahead of time when you're sitting around with somebody and going, hey, man, you're playing it at 100. If you played it at 115, it would have a way better fucking feel with that bass line. Is that
good question.
That goes through your mind when you hear Slipknot playing?
Not necessarily when Slipknot plays, but yeah, when I produce a band, that certainly comes up. Is the tempo right for the song? Are we, as Will Hunt says, can you fucker fight to it?
I think my favorite one was Akon. Akon got proof of concept of is anything going to be a hit? Should we put money into it? He brings it to his local strip club and sees if the girls can strip to it. And I thought that was brilliant. It sounds dumb and like a very strong pimp hand, but let's be real.
Know your audience.
If it wants to be number one, girls got to be able to dance to it. And in fact, you were one of the only guys that broke that trend. Speaking of trend, because Pantera and Death Clock have set records for being at the top of the charts for being extreme metal bands. When can Pantera do it? Can a band like Death Clock that's not even really a band, kind of a band, awesome band, the best band that isn't a band, kind of cartoon band, and they're number one? Can you explain that? By the way, as you're making Doggy Style, as Sting's over there doing Tantra.
I have no idea.
You're the sound of the 90s. You're the guy that
you
fights
both
with
are
each
loaded
other.
with
Yeah, none of
information.
us-
We don't know what your question is.
Because while gangster rap was fighting out the grunge of Dirt by Alice in Chains, he's got Snoop Dogg over here, and then Dr. Dre sitting in the studio, one of the greatest producers of our time. What was that like for you, dude? Sitting as an engineer at Fly on the Wall.
There's just another day in paradise, man. It's kind of like that, we're over in Studio B at Larrabee, with Terry Date at the helm, mixing whatever, mixed White Zombie over there, Death Clock.
Which you got a Grammy nod for it, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. Dr. Dre was in Studio A next door, and he was still there. Really, he was there when I was assisting. Projects at Larrabee and Studio B usually, and one of those projects was working for Dr. Dre, assisting the tracking sessions and beat making sessions, whatever. And it's just it all gets tied together by being in the studio and
Well, I asked Paul Geary,
filling out a work order.
The drummer from Extreme who now manages Johnny Depp and Paul Geary. He used to practice at this famous place in Massachusetts where Aerosmith and the Cars used to play. And I say, did you stand in the bathroom? And then the dude came in, what was that like? And he was like, no, actually, it was because I did see Greg Hawkes in the bathroom from the Cars, and I was amazed by him. And I saw, Rick Ocasek's car. And I'm wondering, did Dre pass you enough times going that honky can sure make an awesome sounding record. Let's get him on the shit.
None of that ever happened, but these are
the scenarios in my head.
Once they called me Shaggy, I knew I was they didn't feel like I was a narc anymore.
So it was. I don't want to say like a corporate vibe, but was there different atmospheres and vibes on different records that were discernible in the creation process and with people in studio? Were some sessions more like what people outside of the industry pictures? Oh, there was a party, everyone's doing shit, or was it very much so a very controlled environment across the board? That just the image of that like studio.
Was it bubonic chronic? 6 a.m. ain't leaving till the party's over.
Like, was there different like vibes based on the different projects you worked on?
Definitely, it was definitely different for if I was assisting or engineering afterwards. As an assistant, you're basically part of the equipment of the studio, like the liaison, and so. Your job is to make sure everything's going smoothly. So you're not partying much, but you could certainly have bands that come through that are partying and other ones that are much more serious. Those were more of the days of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The projects we were doing, or that I worked with as an engineer and later as a producer, they were much tamer and much more serious. Aside from Pantera, of course.
Well, I have to ask you, because how important is sound design? Because what I knew you for was hearing on the radio, and then I knew Tint was coming in.
Yeah.
Tint. And hold on, because
Charlie
that was
Cloud
one of my first metal experiences ever
Don't
was
interrupt him before
Pantera
he
White
answers,
Zombie. But what I'm saying, and that sound was how I knew those bands was all that shit that you created.
Yeah, I mean, it's teamwork. Rob had that vision of this disco metal behemoth of a thing, and Charlie Clouser was making these beats and doing all this programming. That's the word I'm looking for, and we transfer that stuff in and out and, fill up tracks and 2-inch tape. And have this behemoth of a record that we needed to mix and talk about carving out space for things. That was rough to mix. That was a lot of tracks, especially for back in the day when it was, all on tape, and not now where you can have basically unlimited tracks on playlists or on, and Pro Tools or whatever. And playlists, they call them playlists.
Yeah. No, it seems like teamwork. I mean, so many other people on the podcast have said that, there's so much magic in the collaboration with other people, which is why I think it's hard to advise what to do to somebody that's just in their bedroom. How do you do all of this by yourself? Even for me, I know that
clearly make sex noises into your microphone and put it over your song.
But having that ability to bounce ideas off other people and being exposed, even in my experience, I always will come up with better ideas as an orchestrator after I've played a bunch of orchestra concerts, because I've just had something that's taken me out of that, that space for a moment and made my brain think differently, so having that, perspective.
Yeah. Is there something you do like to get yourself in a mindset if you're working on a certain genre of music or if you have a new band coming in you're going to work with, or do you cleanse your palate and just come in fresh?
No, I'm kind of always going full blast. Never really have time to slow down and reset too much. I guess I try to cleanse my world to clear my head before I dive into the next thing. But oftentimes, I work on several projects each day, actually. Like somebody might need a recall of something and, start pre-production on the next album. And I'm still mixing this one.
What dictates how you break that up? Is it, do you like to set a time limit for your projects, or is it just when you feel the need or the motivation to go to another one?
A little bit of both. Some of it is sheer willpower of having to like put something aside, knowing that something else has to be taken care of. And other times it's just pure scheduling. It's like, okay, in the mornings, I'm going to do this for this week. And from noon to 5, I'll do this. And from 5 till midnight, I'll do that. And that also depends, is being dictated by availability of clients of some musicians that some of them still have day jobs because they're in baby bands. Other ones travel to town and they'll get full attention because they've had their travel budgets and their travel schedule. And so, there's a lot of factors that come into play. And I'm the least important one.
Very humble. Well, on that note, we're coming up at the end of our first hour here. Ulrich, thank you.
Is it over yet? Have people subscribed? Did they know about LostSymphony.com?
Yes.
Did they? Smash that like button.
Yes.
Yeah.
Someone actually messaged me today, and they said, "Why don't you aggregate?" And he didn't use the word aggregate. But why don't you get people send out emails saying who's going to be on your show? I'm like, bro, you can press the subscribe button. It will literally tell you. And we realized we've gone 38 episodes before we once said the word subscribe, which as anybody knows in marketing, you should say subscribe over and over. And thank you, Ulrich Wild. Ulrich Wild's the man. Ulrich Wild's awesome. He's a great producer. He loves Fender products like Van Halen. Those earphones are really awesome. Monster loves them too because he has one of those racks in the back, regulating his power as we speak. And with that, you're 2020. Hope you stick around for later this week to hear more from Ulrich if he'll stick around with us.
Peace out.
There I was. This thing comes out, Lollapalooza. I put together Local Palooza. I do it for a few years. First year, 1,000 kids show up. Second year, 2,500. Third year, 4,500. I get a cease and desist order from Perry Farrell and James Addiction. It's all these lawyers' names on it saying,
"Is it framed on your wall?"
Yeah, we own the Palooza trademark. You can't use it anymore. So instead of crying, I went, Yahoo! I've made it! I'm getting sued.